And now it's connecting. We are live, and I just muted it on YouTube. And now I'll go out of it because it'll take up our streaming. But we should see in the top left-hand corner on YouTube, so that will know that we're on YouTube. And now I'm going to move around and make Melissa a co-host. As soon as I can. So Melissa is I've just made Melissa a co-host, and Louisa, I believe you want to be a co-host as well, right? I'm going to make Louisa a co-host. And now Louisa is a co-host. We have more people coming in, but I'm now going to hand the meeting off to our co-chairs and slip quietly into the background.
Thanks, Steve.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Vianda. How are you?
Fine. How are you doing?
Good. I think we're reaching critical mass. We can get started in a few minutes.
Just
Hi, Vianda.
Oh,
Hi, Felipe.
Hi, good evening.
hey, Melissa. How's everybody doing? Quick question. When the time comes to present for me and Vianda, can we share our screens? I believe that you might need to give me host powers.
Yeah, I think we can do that. 1 second.
You know how to do that, right?
I can make it so all panelists can share, or is
Yep.
that the best way to do it? Okay.
The only way that our subscription allows, yeah.
Okay. Felipe, now you should be able to do it.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
And I'm just going to say one thing to Susan. So Susan, then we'll make everyone who's an attendee who's in the first section, we start moving to a panelist. And then sometimes some of our members come in that way, and I usually keep a spot. And then when the next phase comes up, we will then promote attendees into panelists and go back and forth. And that's the last phase. And now I will officially definitely stop.
Okay, well, it's 6:30, and I think we definitely have enough board members here to get started. We have a really full agenda tonight, so we're actually going to run this pretty tightly in terms of timing. HPD can only be with us till 7:45, so we really want to make the most of that time and try to be thoughtful with our questions and our comments. And just to kick us off, Roberta is going to take 5 minutes to talk about the budget process and DNS. And Roberta, I'm literally going to time you because of the tightness of this meeting. Please jump in and we can send out the materials afterwards. So
Less than 5 minutes. Just very quickly, the budget, and this year we're going to have 20 budget priorities, capital and expense. And I will send around a memo to everybody, but we're going to have a very tight timeline this year. We're starting a little bit late. So at the April meeting, we want you to identify the stakeholders and start scheduling meetings for May and June. In May, you start meeting with your shareholders. April 30th, the census data is printed. You review the 2020 census data. June, you finish your stakeholder meetings. You draft your community needs and your priorities. July, committees need to vote on their needs and priorities. August, there are no meetings. September, there will be public hearing on district needs and priorities, in addition to whatever the committees have. We hope the committees will have their hearings as well. At the budget committee will prepare a draft, which will be voted on at the steering committee, and the vote at the full board meeting will be on the budget priorities. The district needs is the same timeline. It just, we don't vote on it at the full board meeting. So I will send this around to the entire committee. I have 2 items that I will be sending. Thank you. How is that for time, Melissa?
Very good. Okay, now I would like to introduce Vianda Simmons, who is the Director of Planning of the Manhattan office for HPD, and Felipe Cortez, who is the Deputy Director. So, and they are going to talk about the collegiate money, the collegiate project, how the money was spent, and hopefully we will then move on to what HPD is doing in the district at the moment and how we can all be involved in a helpful and encouraging way.
And let's just hold questions and comments until the end of their formal presentation, please.
Absolutely.
So we have a PowerPoint presentation for you, and thank you so much for inviting us to discuss the collegiate funds. I believe it's been over 3 years since a team member has presented updates to the committee board. That would have been Kevin Paris. Some of you may recall he's a deputy director of the Manhattan planning team. Since then, team members have changed. We have a new deputy director, Felipe, and I believe some of your board members have changed. So this is a good time to make a presentation and look forward to hearing some of your questions. So go to the next slide. So in terms of the agenda item, we'll just provide a brief overview of the collegiate funds, discuss the funding allocation process, provide an update on project allocations, and then open it up for Q&A. So I believe most people know that in 2015, the collegiate school agreed to put $50 million into a fund for the creation of or preservation of affordable housing within Community Board 7. The funds were created because a collegiate school pledged to build affordable housing in the southern part of Community Board 7. However, the city later agreed to create a fund instead of developing the affordable housing. So starting with 2016 to 2017, funding for varied projects took place throughout Community Board 7, and this is kind of a map that shows the varied areas where funding has taken place. And this last round, there were 3 projects that were funded, and I'll go over that with you in detail. So as the slide shows, you know, there were the Brandon, which is now called 3 Arts Club, was funded. It's on 340 West 85th Street. Independence House received funding. VOA Rose House received funding. 107 West 105th Street received funding. 981 Amsterdam Avenue received funding. And Catch 165 West 80th Street received funding. So again, I believe these updates were provided in the past to the community board. Correct me if I'm wrong. And these past fundings updates were provided to the electeds as well. So the method that HPD uses to determine how to distribute the funding is based upon need for either the preservation of affordable housing or new construction projects that cannot receive other funding streams, that are not able to receive subsidies. So many of these projects, pretty much all of them, are close to closing, and this is called what we term gap financing. So it may be for the rehabilitation of a roof repair or facade, or a project may be moving towards closing stages, and there's $1 million a gap that's needed to ensure that the project closes. So those are the criteria that are used to determine which projects would receive the collegiate funding. We receive recommendations from the electeds that really focus on making sure that Community Board 7 receives these great projects. Again, whether they're new construction or the preservation of projects. So I do also want to thank our electeds for working very closely with our intergov team on many of these recommendations. And also, I believe they're in coordination with Community Board 7. So some of the recent projects that were funded, which means last year, includes Turin House, 609 Columbus Avenue, Stephen Russo Residences, which is located at 235 West 107th Street and 105 in Amsterdam. These are ANCPE projects, 981 Amsterdam and 107 West 105th Street. West 105th Street. So just to give some more description about these recent funding allocations, in terms of the project description, 71 units, including 56 supportive housing for formerly homeless with on-site services, was what was allocated for 235 West 107th Street. There are 13 preserved units currently occupied and rent stabilized. And there's one superintendent, and all residents would be at 60% of AMI and below. So again, this was a project that came through our supportive housing loan program, and the closing will take place soon. I don't have the exact closing timeline, but I can get back to you on that if that's something that you're interested in. In terms of Turin House, many of you probably know that it's co-op units. All units have sales prices that are restricted at 130% of AMI, and it's through the participation loan program. So the closing will take place in June. So that's an example of where there's gap financing to make sure that the project is able to close. And then the last funding stream went to the ANCP projects, with a total of 28 units for maintenance at 41% of AMI, vacant units sales, at 100% AMI. So this is again the Affordable Neighborhood Cooperative Program, where the closing took place in the past, but needed funding stream to make sure that the project proceeds forward. So I think there are some questions that came up in terms of which units or what specific units these funding streams are allocated towards. And that's kind of not how the funding works. The funding is a lump sum approach that, again, either fills in gaps that are needed to make sure the project closes. There are unexpected costs that come up, maybe facade repairs or rehab work. And so it's not specifically going towards specific units in that respect. Additionally, I think, there were some concerns about HPD working more closely with Community Board 7. We're happy to serve as a liaison for HPD. There are other divisions that work on this initiative. Again, many of them I mentioned, the ANCP program, the preservation team. We have our Mitchell Lama division, and we have our supportive housing division and new construction division. So I think there were, in terms of the amount that's left in the funding, it's under $1 million. So again, just really working with Community Board 7 in terms of any future recommendations. We're happy to do that moving forward. And I think those are many of the questions that we received, and just really happy to answer more questions.
Great, thank you. Louisa, why don't you and I first just ask any questions we have, and then we'll open it to the committee and other board members.
Okay, Vianda, I was curious that two of the new buildings that the new projects that you talked about, the 105 Amsterdam and 981 Amsterdam, but they were covered already in the initial spending that we were told about, that was encompassed in the 36 million. Mm-hmm. So it seemed to me, looking at this, that just the Turin House, was there 14 million that went to Turin House? or 13 million?
I don't have the exact amount. I don't think 14 million went to just Turin House, no. The funding was divided between those 3 developments, but I know for sure 14 million did not go to the Turin House. I can get more
Okay.
details and get back to you on that.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that this was an overall fund that was used to fit in when it was needed. I'm just kind of curious, what if the collegiate money hadn't been there? Wouldn't the city have had to fill in these gaps?
Well, that's a good question. So there are occasions, especially in this climate, where we are in a budget crisis, and there unfortunately are quite a few projects that are not closing, that are not able to proceed forward. This preceded the pandemic, and things were exacerbated by the pandemic, as you can imagine, in terms of our funding cycle and the crisis, the budget crisis that still remains with the city that will hopefully be lifted soon. But that's a good comment, a question, but there are many projects that are not able to proceed forward when many of these situations arise. But some of them are unexpected.
Just
Okay.
ask, can you change your screen so that we get rid of any questions and we can see everybody? Can we just do that? Because you're not telling us anything by having this on there. Do you want me to do it or just get rid of that?
No,
So
I can do it.
Yeah.
I can do it. Don't worry, Ethel. Let me
Thank you.
stop this.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the committee members. Thank you.
Thanks, Ethel. Sorry, Lucy, I don't know if you're done, but I just want to jump in with a few. So could you actually tell us who's the sponsor for each of the projects you went through? I'd just be curious to know who's receiving the funding.
Yes, in let's see. Yes, I can get that information for you. Let's see.
Okay, so you don't have it on hand. It would be.
No, I don't have it on hand. I can get that information for you.
Okay, and then my
That'd be
other
great.
question, which I thought we had kind of flagged for you when we were prepping, but we were interested in knowing like the total development cost of each so that we could just see like what part of the budget was made up by the funds, just to get a better idea of like what kind of like size gap is it filling, and you know, for that in that way be able to see like what the money was going towards. Would that be something that HP would be willing to follow up with?
Yes, definitely.
That'd be great.
Yes.
Sorry, Louisa, I interrupted your questions.
No, that's fine. But it seems to me, looking at the projects that were funded, that all of them would come under the category of preservation rather than new construction. Is that correct?
Most of them were preservation, fell under ANCP. Most of the time, ANCP projects are rehab. Some of them are new construction. So yes, generally.
Okay.
I can break that down for you as well, which ones were new construction versus preservation.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Louisa, before we open it to the?
No, let's open it to everybody.
Okay, great. See, Robert and Ethel have their hands up. Oh, Ethel, why don't you jump in, and then Robert?
I'm sorry, was Robert first? I don't want to.
I don't know, actually, because you were in person, he was digital. One
Oh,
of you
okay.
take the
Oh,
liberty.
okay, yeah, I didn't put my hand, I didn't put my hand, I'm sorry. Thank you. First of all, it would be very helpful that you provide much of what you summarized in a clear way in writing, that the board has that as a reference, so that, for example, until now, we did have clearly, as presented in 2017, what was called the collegiate tracker, and it was sent to the board. We always had questions, but exactly with the funding amount, the type, when, how many units, preservation, and so on, and when they were awarded. It would be very good to get that in writing. And it is particularly the case because for many of us, we are hearing about the last projects, the Turin House and the others, because you were able to, am I correct, please, that you were selecting those for the remaining, and correct, interrupt me, please, for the remaining 15 or 16 million dollars. That is, in 2017, you had presented the board with a chart which totaled, of the 50 million, 36 million going for these particular projects, which we have all been able to study. And there was a clear laying out of how much, what percentage of the collegiate money went to each building and how many units were provided. It would be good, and I unless the chairs have it, Vianda, that you read to us the last 3 or 4 projects, and that's good, but it would be very good that you furnish this to the board in a very clear fashion so we know exactly where the money's going, what are the developments, and we can see this and have it as part of the work of the community board as it has been provided earlier in 2017. Would that be possible to do?
Yes, sure. I will follow up.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
I have 2 more very quick questions, but please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for your question, and we'd be happy to follow up. As I mentioned earlier, we have new staff working with our team, and prior staff have moved on to bigger and better initiatives. So we'll be able to furnish that information in the same manner that you did receive it in the past.
Thank you. And when the initial allocation, the 36 million, and the listing of all those projects, as we received them, as we read them, it appeared to be that all of those and the expenditure of the 36 million was in the category of preservation, that all of them. And so when I think Louisa asked you, has it had new units? If so, how is that described? Or is it accurate that the most recent, the last 3, are also preservation? That is, money was allocated as these buildings were being preserved and made better. Is there any what would be categorized as new units?
That's a good question, and
yes, thank you.
Yes, that's a good question, and I will need to reconfirm that and can provide that in writing.
Okay, so that would also be terrific to have in writing. And the third thing is that, and maybe other board members can correct me, as far as I know, the last 3 or 4, and am I correct that totaled of the 50, that's 14 million, though I think you also said that of the so-called 50, there is still 1 million that has not been utilized?
It's under $1 million.
It's a 2-part question, yeah.
Yes, it's under $1 million. My understanding it's under $1 million that's left in the fund.
Okay, so that there's an so that the last 3 projects that you outlined, 14 million was utilized for the preservation of units in those 3 projects. Is that right?
I think that's about correct, but I will reconfirm that.
Yeah, because also I think it would be at least, this was a very important and unique thing to do, because the river, it's all about, to begin with, Riverside South. and the amount of money and the number of units was all part of the approval for the development of affordable housing in Riverside South. The big change among many was because one of the sites was sold to Collegiate, and Collegiate, being a school, wasn't going to be doing affordable housing on site. So that's why, of course, I won't go over it, but Collegiate, of its own money, has said 50 million to be spent on affordable. And that's what you've been doing. And that's what's taken the time over these years. So it's important, I think, for us to be as accurate as possible to know, okay, so is it the 49 million of the so-called 50 has been utilized, and it is completed with the allocation of the last buildings that we learned about verbally from you, and that you all are going to send us in writing the details of these last buildings. Is that
Right.
a correct summary?
Yes, it's a good summary, and we'll again follow up in the same format that you described in terms of the tracker.
That would be great. And so the million is within your, so to speak, authorization? I mean, it's under your bailiwick, or is there anything you're thinking to do? I mean, what's $1 million here and there nowadays? And maybe it's not a lot of money, but just wondering, what's the story with that? Is that to be spent, or how, or what?
No decisions have been made that I'm aware of with the last 1 million or so,
Okay.
or under 1 million. So again, if you have any recommendations, or I see Councilmember Rosenthal, if there are any recommendations that you would like to discuss with us moving forward, we'd be happy to collaborate more in the future.
Okay, so I don't have any more questions, but I'm echoing what Louisa said and what the chair said, that I think everyone is more than interested and concerned that Community Board 7 and your office or HPD be in good dialogue and be participants in what is happening in the community and be able to make recommendations. I, for example, maybe others do, have no idea how the last 3 were selected, not criticize it so much as wonder about the process. And it's important for historical reasons, but for reason now that Community Board 7, which has always welcomed affordable housing, unlike perhaps other places, is part of the participation, the recommendation, and just working together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thank you for that, Ethel. And
Okay.
I'd
I'd like to ask one question, just a clarification, if I might.
I'd like to just say something, but go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Leander, I just wanted to make sure we are not talking at all of new construction, because you mentioned that at one point. It is rehabilitation or reconstruction of existing buildings. Correct?
No, the funding stream is for either preservation, rehabilitation, or new construction projects. I would
Okay.
just have to look in more detail and I can provide to you updates in writing to see which ones encompass new construction, if any of them.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to remark quickly, I really appreciate you guys being here, but I thought it was made clear ahead of time that we were really hoping to see a list of projects and like with details on those projects. So it's just a little bit disappointing that that information wasn't brought to this meeting. And again, I do really appreciate you guys participating, and I'll just leave it at that and allow Robert to speak, who's been so patient.
Well, I do want to respond to that. I apologize for the misunderstanding. It wasn't clear that you wanted the kind of list at this presentation, but we'll be able to provide that moving forward.
Great, really appreciate that.
Quick question. Would it be possible for the board to share the template or the structure that you guys used to receive the information?
Yeah, sure.
So that we can be as accurate as possible?
Yeah.
We'll send it to you tomorrow.
Thank you. That would be great.
Okay, Robert.
Yeah, thanks. I'm retracting my questions and just converting them to not comments, but food for thought, because I think it's unfair. Ms. Simmons can field a number of questions, but the kind of questions that I have and that I'm hearing from the chairs are really questions that are answerable by your financing person, the person who put the mortgage together. Because what I mean is, in the one case, where some funds were used, it's making possible or facilitating the closing, and you mentioned one of the features in the development. And when you find, and I've had experience in this in refinancing projects, affordable housing, and so on, and senior citizen housing, and all of those expenses, all of those costs. I think the example you used was for a roof or something like that, whichever project in that list that you enumerated.
Mhm.
All of these expenses, which are massive, are covered. So you can get a tax credit program worth $10 million if you have a sizable project. And you're going to do the roof, and you're going to do the elevators, and you're going to do the windows, and you're going to do the plumbing, and so on. And it's all covered. Yet, of course, you're going to have other expenses that are appendages to these projects that are not provided in the funding in the tax credit program, okay? That you would seek funding from elsewhere. And there are different ways of getting the funding. The financing profile for these projects is very complex. So it isn't just HDC that's going to give you the money. It isn't just this place. You're going to get the money from a number of places, the bulk of which is going to be tax credits. So that when you say that some of this money was allocated from the collegiate funds to make it possible for this project to be completed, it's just a little mysterious. And I think that Louisa and Melissa got to that. And we begin to get a sense of the cost from the cost of development. And then you say this component costs this much and so on. And then you understand. And then you see where the gaps are. And then you see where that money can come from. Because it's beginning to sound, and I don't want to misrepresent myself, because what this money is doing, even if we're not fully satisfied that we're being told where it's going, it is moving things along. And you reported that a number of projects are nearing closing, and a few have closed because of this money, okay? So it's looking like a pandemic relief fund, because the discourse that we had on this, I don't know, Melissa, by how many years does it predate the pandemic? 3 years or something?
3 or 4, yeah.
Yeah, so that we were looking at it quite differently, but yet, it is serving the purpose of preservation. Because as Ms. Simmons pointed out, in these times, things are difficult, money's being taken from here, sent over there. And if that project lost $2 million because of some other dire need, then they picked this trough, they went in there and they took some money out and put it there. So at the end of the day, it is serving the purpose of preservation, because whether it is a new construction project that needs some other help that was possible at a time, but suddenly it's not, then this money was applied to that. So that's on the question that was formulated very clearly, I think, between Melissa and Louisa. And Ethel got to it as well, okay?
Wait,
so
to clarify, Robert, you're saying you just agree that we should see the total development cost of the project?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that with that set of information, then we begin to get a clear picture. And then maybe we can get a sense of what the gaps were that this money would have been needed for. But if we don't have that total picture of the money and the type of money that it was, there's LICTI money, there's that money, but they're all tax credit funds. So that where the gaps are is and how you fill those gaps. It's almost a creative process in the development of the project. Okay, the money was there at a time, but then suddenly over the pandemic period, the last 2 years, the money was no longer there. Suddenly,
Robert, I think that the point overall is they're using this as gap filler before the pandemic. And I think the point that other people are trying to make is that OMB could allow them to like give more subsidy to these projects, but instead of doing that, they chose to take money out of this pot to fill a gap. And that's kind of unsatisfactory to people, but that's why.
I might have been a little awkward in expressing it, but you expressed it very well. So that's exactly what that, but that's it. It's being used essentially as a pandemic relief fund. Okay, instead of getting the money from where it should be coming from because it's no longer there, it's being used for this. But that's my question. That's my comment, my thought around that particular part. But the other part, Miss Simmons, is that I'm in real estate sales, so I understand the affordable housing sales market, and I specialize in HDFCs. And we can't sell in Mitchell-Lama, but I live in the Mitchell-Lama, and I do know that in the proposal to develop a project or to preserve a project, where the AMI is a factor, and it is a factor, if you don't present a very clear, cogent, workable formula for the rent profile, according to what the communities, or however you define community, don't forget it's a very expansive definition what AMI is, that it's going to be affordable to that income bracket in that general community. If you don't present that clearly, you're not going to get the loan. You're just not going to get the loan. So that when you make the comment that in a particular, I don't recall what the name of it, but you said it was one of the co-ops, that because of the AMI, that maybe wasn't satisfactory, that the amount of money they got from the collegiate funds is making the closing possible. So you can't subsidize from some outside fund the financing for the project, which incorporates the AMI formula. So, what is meant when? What did you mean when? So I guess I do have the question, but it's not an aggressive question because, again, I'm going to repeat it again, that whatever money you gave them, it's making it possible for that project to do whatever it had to do and maintain the rent. So that the preservation of affordable housing in the Mitchell-Lama sense, or whatever the nature of that co-op was, is a good thing. But how, if you can open up that sentence and that it was the funding from the collegiate pool that is making or facilitating that closing because of the AMI structure. If you can pay, Ms. Simmons, if you can add a little bit to that.
Robert, I'm not sure I was clear on your question. So just, were you asking about why they were using the funding to subsidize lower AMIs in preservation projects? Is that the gist of it?
Well, in that particular project, because I haven't heard that before, to use those money for that. Because what you do is, because the income profile of the community is a given thing. I mean, you understand, it has fluidity, but it's a given thing. Yeah. And you have to structure your mortgage and then therefore your maintenance fees and the income bracket for the affordability of if you can afford to live here or not, sort of thing. But how are the collegiate funds being used to subsidize that? That part I just don't get. I don't get that. That's brand new to me. So essentially, you're just teaching me something.
In a co-op project, is that what you were?
Yeah, there was.
Okay, so how was the funding used to preserve units in the co-op structure of these projects?
Because of the AMI structure of the project, which is a mortgage thing. So essentially subsidizing to some extent the mortgage. So I don't know how that works. Ms. Simmons, is that too sloppy a question?
It's not too sloppy of a question. I would say that I would need to get more details. I would not I may have represented my response incorrectly or conveyed information incorrectly. I think you started off kind of with a key factor, and that is we're in the planning team. Most of our colleagues who we work with in the other divisions do work on the financing structures of many of these projects.
Right.
And so the details that you're requesting that we will be providing in writing would be my colleagues would be able to better respond to these because they administer the underwriting for all of the projects. And so I think, we wanted to come to the meeting tonight to be responsive. Clearly, we need to provide more concrete information, but I think, many of my colleagues are more well-versed on a lot of the details that you're asking. And so,
Well,
unfortunately.
Yeah, Robert, hold on. I just want to make a comment. Maybe this is just a little bit of frustration on the part of the board. I feel like it will be very difficult for us to get someone who works in preservation finance or new construction finance to come address the board. I think usually those requests go to the intergovernmental team, and then it's very hard to get a representative here. So if you could help us, make sure that can happen in the future, we'd really be very appreciative, because I think we do have some technical questions that would be, better answered by one of those divisions.
Well, let me tack on. Yes, Melissa, let me tack on because I think—
Robert, I'm going to have to ask that you keep it very short because we only have about 30 minutes left.
Closing couplet. This is a closing couplet.
Okay.
So this is my take on Ethel's point that if we were your collaborators on an ongoing basis, and we were actually able to participate in these conversations with you, because we understand, we are realtors, we're architects, we're advocates in housing, and we're lawyers. So it's not necessarily above our pay grade to work with you.
Good point.
And so as the formulation with the mortgage financing team that they structure the mortgage is talking, if we're sitting there at the table with them, we could add our 2 cents, which has exponential value. And so that's I think one of the asks that we have, because I don't mean this aggressively, but we're entitled to know.
No, I agree with what you're saying, and I'm very familiar with the level of sophistication of this community board, going back to the Wishfish project on 107th Street, and then recently our team also worked on advancing the 266 West 96th Street. Those are the only 2 projects that I've worked with this community board on since I've been at HPD, and it's been a great partnership with all of you who really are very, very sophisticated and have a long history of activism in this community. So I think, again, it's, and you're right, Melissa, just being able to confirm moving forward that, there are others who are able to speak to the details of the collegiate funding that you're requesting. I think the first step is to provide data in writing, as Ethel mentioned, and then making sure that I can have other partners at HPD come to present. It is really challenging at this time period, but nevertheless, I think, the next time we can make sure that the presenters are more than just the planning team.
Great, really appreciate that. Okay, Mark, shoot.
Thank you to the chairs, and thank you to Ms. Simmons and Mr. Cortez. I want to reinforce or add a layer to what I understood Louise's question to be. I hope at the end of my speaking, Louisa will recognize it as the same question that she was asking. And what I want to try to put together is the origin of the collegiate money, from my very simple understanding from several years ago, was that there was an obligation to build 55 units of affordable housing that was transferred into money so that those 55 units could be built elsewhere. And if I'm understanding the questions correctly, And then there may have been something in what Ms. Simmons offered this evening that I thought needed a follow-up in this respect. If there were 55 units which were 100% funded by what we're all calling the collegiate money, that would be in satisfaction of that expectation and perhaps obligation. If only half of the money, if there were 110 units that were half funded, then that would also seem to be in satisfaction of that obligation. And 220 by a quarter, I hope I'm making the point. And so what I understood Louisa to ask about in terms of tracking the units, and what the questions the chairs had shared in advance, Ms. Simmons, isn't so much which one of the units within a building are funded by collegiate money versus some other money, but rather taking as a totality, there's some number of units that the $50 million, which is almost all spent, has either created or preserved. And if we divide that by the percentage of funding used, we're either going to figure out that we've got what we expected to get, or we didn't. My suspicion is that you did, but it would be a helpful thing, a positive thing to know and be able to repeat whether or not we actually got 55 units or more. And it might be a terrific success story if it's more. But I think that is something that was part and parcel of the community board's interest in seeing this money spent in the way that we wanted it spent, because going back to first principles, that was its origin. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that can be included in whatever tabulated data is provided to the chairs. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeanette?
Hi, thanks. I think building on what Mark was saying, that I think, yes, we'd like to see the data. I was housing chair at the time that this happened. And I remember we sent a letter suggesting projects, and we talked about how the money should be used. But I think somewhere along the line, as staff changed and such, that the communication fell apart. But nevertheless, I trust that HPD, could find very good use for these funds, especially the fact that these funds did not have strings attached to them, that they could only be used for this or that, but it was really a pot of funding to use as is. The problem, I think, is when you go back to what was the original intent. The original intent was to get 55 affordable units in the new development of Riverside South and its surrounding to make that community more diverse, economically diverse. Instead, the school came, and the school was the very last parcel, so there was no other place to put those units. Now, whether that was intended by the developers or not, I don't know, but it's neither here nor there now. So in the city struggled to try to figure out how to create more affordable units in a community, and especially a community that is as high income as ours. I'm not sure that we win here, because from my understanding, we don't have any net gain of 55 new units. We have a very worthy preservation of numerous units, and the chances are that we would have been allocating to city government and our elected officials for funding to fill those gaps of those units to keep them affordable. Maybe we wouldn't have got 100%, but we probably would have got most of it. And instead, that money, those city dollars that would have filled the gap in our community are now going to another community. Now, that said, we're one city, and that's not terrible, because the more money to spread around, the better. But at the end of the day, I don't feel like the Upper West Side has any more affordable units or is any more diverse than it was at the beginning. So I would just like to see HPD sort of take a step back and look at this process as you try to figure out ways to get, whether it's build or otherwise, more affordable units in communities, and really assess whether this is a a positive or not? I mean, I think on the one hand, having more funding to cover gaps is probably a good thing. But I think that when you look at the history of this project, I don't feel like the Upper West Side gained in becoming more diverse in any portion of our community. And you can let me know if you agree or disagree, or if HBD is going to try to look at this as they try to come up with new creative ways to build affordable units. Thank you.
Right.
Very.
I agree with Jeanette. I have wondered, and this question has arisen often, about why they were not able to build or rehabilitate units that were closer to Riverside South. Why the difference that, you know, it's more than 2 miles away, almost all the other units. And since, as Jeanette said, the idea was to make the very white portion of the lower part of the community board more diverse, what happened?
So those are good questions. I know in the criteria that's set to decide on projects that would receive allocations first, I know that was a criteria. Any projects that were located in the southern portion were prioritized. But I would have to really look back and evaluate or understand all of the funding decisions that were made to give you an accurate answer as to the decisions that were made to allocate this funding in other areas aside from the southern portion. And Jeanette, I think all of your comments are critical as HPD has produced the Where We Live document that really focuses on equity, particularly in neighborhoods that historically have not seen equity in many aspects. So commitments moving forward are definitely in writing in varied aspects, including the Where We Live document. So that is a critical piece that you brought up.
Okay. Any other questions from committee or non-committee members?
So just will we be able, can we get the information that as we requested in writing in the next, rather soon? I think, speaking for myself, I'd rather not wait, 6 months for what we were asking for, the details about the last projects, the funding, the status of all of the projects, and that we can have that and take a look at it and then know where we are together, and then be able to work together, as the chairs have said, for continuing and intensifying, even in these times, the production of affordable housing in Board 7 and of course elsewhere in the borough and in the city, because that's absolutely essential. So if you could tell us or communicate that we'll be getting this information in the next, let's say, less than a month or something, because we've been asking, and these decisions, some of them were made, last year, and we didn't know about those and the selection of the last one. It'd be good to have all that in a communicating, readable fashion, and with all the information that has been requested tonight.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Ethel, why don't you send any additional questions that you have, and any board member, to Melissa, myself, and we will send them on to Vianda to supplement the notes that I know that she's taken. But the other thing is, I think that as so many people have expressed that we would like to be involved ongoing, is there any way that we can set up some system where we meet with you or you come to us 4 times a year Yeah, what's going on in the district? How can we be involved?
Sure. So going back to Ethel's question, we will have this to you before your next meeting. So that's within, I guess, a
Thank
month.
you.
And Louisa, yes, we can explore methods for meeting more frequently with Community Board 7. And also I will identify other colleagues who also are active in Community Board 7 to see who else can
Terrific.
participate. So that will be my homework.
That would be super helpful. Yeah, I think, and just to add on to that, what would be helpful is like just looking at your pipeline, if there's something that's going to be in the district and it's as of right, even especially like just
Especially if it's as of
for us,
right.
getting us like a quarterly update on just what's being financed, just because it's helpful for us to know. You guys are doing such amazing preservation work, it looks like, especially in Manhattan Valley. So just having a more holistic picture of that would be just helpful for us as the housing committee.
Sure, we'd be happy to do that and have more frequent check-ins.
Great. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to let our wonderful guests go. Oh, Roberta, are you waving or you're clapping? I can't tell.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for your thoughtful questions and concerns. We'll get back to you.
Great, really appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you,
appreciate it.
everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you. I
Okay.
hope we continue this discussion.
We will.
We will.
Terrific.
Okay, we actually are ahead of schedule, which is remarkable.
Amazing.
And,
Who would have thunk?
Not us.
Because they didn't have the answers to any of the questions.
that's somewhat
I
true.
know.
Listen, the questions were, I mean, we worked on them, and I sent in questions to the chairs, others did. The chairs developed questions. Before I came here again, I checked to see what had been sent and what we all did. And
We
You
sent the questions.
I know you did. So,
We actually discussed them with her.
I mean, it was all just as if, who knew? And even their presentation, it was like without numbers, that you'd have a visual, and it did. And looked at a slide, I'm amazed you couldn't get all the simple information at one time. I mean, come on, folks. That was not the way to do it. I don't care. I mean, to any community board or to anybody. It's not the way.
I mean, I think I expressed that to her, that I was disappointed that we had flagged these questions ahead of time and they did not come with answers. I can only speculate that perhaps it was a lack of coordination internally at HPD. Not that that's our problem, but they've committed to providing the information. Unfortunately, we'll just have to revisit this in another meeting. It's not as efficient, but we will get the information.
Well, I call it the DHS syndrome.
The what?
The DHS syndrome.
I don't know what that means.
We love all of our agencies. They all have their
They
own.
teach us that way. They treat us the same way.
Okay, so can we move it along?
Yep. Okay, so I know we're running ahead of schedule, so some of the NYCHA tenant leaders may not yet be in the meeting, but and Steve is kind of joined as a special MC for this part of the meeting. I think Polly is here though. So are we able to start now on this next agenda item?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think we can. I've been promoting some of them. I'm gonna give me a few minutes to get coordinated. There may be a few that join in the last few minutes, but we have several. I'm gonna introduce Larry for a minute and just ask some questions. And that is Larry or Polly. I'm keeping an eye for Ernesto, Starlin, and Venus. I have not seen them in the attendees. I think I promoted Cynthia, Mona Lisa, Ramona, Mary, and Jack. I'm just looking for any help that if I don't recognize, there is a phone number, and perhaps they will be joining us in a few minutes. But Jack, Larry, do you see in the attendees if I'm missing anybody? Because now that you are a panelist, you may be able to help me.
I think you have most folks. Starlin may be joining as well as Ernesto, but we told them 7:30 because it was you had your other business, the first agenda item.
Sorry about that.
And we'll keep it on. We very rarely are above time. I'm giving a big hands up to the crew here because that does not happen that much. I think we were nervous the other way. So I think we're okay. We're only a few minutes beforehand, and if they come in, we'll be fine, and I'll keep an eye.
And I also want to explain to the, thank you, Housing Committee, for having this opportunity. Let me start. There's actually a written report, so you're just going to get a verbal summary from Polly, but I understand there's a longer document on behalf of all the buildings. And maybe about an hour ago, I sent a report both from Sandra Thomas and Wise Rehabs, which are just supplementing that larger report, which is focusing on the bigger issues affecting all the developments with actionable items. But Polly will be covering a lot of that, and as time allows, I think we want the NYCHA leaders to at least introduce themselves. They're not going to give you a report from every building, but at least you can put a face with the particular development together and then hear the overall report. And we do want to work together, not just a report, but to take action to address a lot of the issues you're going to hear raised.
And then Larry, I'm just going to add even a little bit more agenda item is that this is, we wanted to talk about NYCHA. We wanted to get sort of an overall update. We've been working even to introduce Larry. We were working with Larry. We've been working with Polly. We've been working with, and one of the ideas was to get some leaders. There's, for people that don't know, there's a group called the Federal 8. I'm going to let them all introduce themselves. They are very esteemed leaders in the community around different NYCHA developments. They work together in terms of coordinating their efforts. They have prepared something for us to sort of an overall report that I think Larry said that we can follow up afterwards. It's a little more detailed, but I think it's, and Polly's going to kind of give us a summary of sort of their thoughts. The idea is to get an update in some things that are going on. And then the idea would be for us, how can we help? We also want to speak to a broader group. So we've got our own community board members that are members of NYCHA, including Madeline, who's been a leader, and Polly as well. So what the process would be is what we wanted to do is just give everyone an opportunity, as Larry said, to do a brief introduction. And then Polly would speak, which is a sort of a consolidated work. She could speak to a little more specifically. Then we will get feedback from various different members at any Q&A, and then we could decide what to do. So I'll go back to you, to Larry, to introduce yourself, and then I will try and do my best to go around and give everyone an opportunity. I'll go down the list, and I'd like everyone just to introduce themselves and the different properties that they are either president or their leadership position. So Larry, you're up first.
Good evening again. My name is Larry Wood. I serve as Director of Organizing at Goddard Riverside. I've been on staff there for 33 years. And over the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been doing work with local Federal 8 NYCHA leaders in the community, among many other projects at Goddard.
Okay, and I just have a list, so in no other order. I'm going to just ask each one of you to go. And Jack, you are the first one on my list. Jack, I believe you're here, and I know that you are quite verbose, Jack, so you got to unmute yourself. Jack?
Oh, Jack unmuted.
Jack, you have to unmute yourself.
He's unmuted.
He is unmuted.
Maybe
Okay.
having mic issues.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on, and then we'll come back to you, Jack. We'll see what we can do. Mary, I have you as next.
Good evening. My name is Mary Beierbach. I'm the TA president of Sandra Thomas Apartments. We're senior development. We have about 80 residents here at the present time, about 10 in nursing homes.
Thank you, Mary. Ramona?
Good evening. My name is Ramona Minor. I'm the president of the Hostos.
Ramona.
Thank you. Mona Lisa?
Good evening. My name is Mona Lisa Morales, and I'm the president of the Dome Site Development. at West 84th Street.
Hello.
Thank you, Mona Lisa.
Thank you.
Cynthia?
Hi, so this is Cynthia Tibbs, TA President of Worcester Brownstones, 36 buildings. In addition to the report that you'll be receiving from Polly and Jack, I'd just like to state we are now in our 7th month with 11 buildings with no gas. A lot of that has to do with the fact that NYCHA has once again restructured this area. We lost our mixed finance crew. They now have what's called neighborhood coordinators instead of RAMs. And while we're getting more communication with the management, we are no longer getting communication from the higher levels up. And that's where the problem lays in.
Thank you, Cynthia, for sharing. And then I think we're going to go, Jack, have you figured out your tech issues? Because I see you there. No.
Jack, can you hear me?
Jack, are you there?
I can mention for Jack, since we can't hear him. Jack is the current president of what's known as Worcester Site B. That's 74 West 92. And that's 168 units.
Oh, he says microphone won't work. Sorry, Jack.
Okay.
Oh, he's gonna call in. Great.
Okay. Well, why don't we move forward? I'll keep an eye. I have looked back into the attendees, and I don't see Ernesto or I don't see Starlin. I don't see Venus, but I'll keep a look. But why don't we move on? And I think the next section was Polly. Why don't you describe what you'll be, reporting, and Jack and other people afterwards want to join in if we get Jack on, or any of the leaders want to
Okay,
speak.
well, I have several reports. I have a report from Mary Meyerback, from Sandra Thomas, and also from Venus Perales, and then another report that we kind of put together for the remaining sites. So I don't know if Mary wants to read her report. I don't know if she has it in front of her. Mary?
Polly, why don't you give the report, the summary? I think that would be good.
Okay, I just
Well,
want
I think you were going to give the summary first, and then we can let everyone add a little bit. But why don't you give the summary report?
All right. So basically, I'll start out with the summary, and then we'll go into the specifics of the issues, because there's a myriad of issues that needs to be addressed. But we really tried to put together the ones that were most important. All right. And so in the report, I'm just going to read kind of like verbatim, so to speak. We're talking about the decades of systemic neglect at our buildings here on the Upper West Side, leading to deterioration in safety, security, and the infrastructure. Okay. And also the refusal of NYCHA to interface with resident leaders and residents in order to actively resolve these issues. So we broke down the report into specific areas. And so we're going to speak to these areas. I'm going to give you the subsets that we highlight. And then I will send each of you a copy of the report. So we started out with safety and physical security. We also are going to speak to, in the report, layered access system, which we're going to break it down to you in the report, what that means. Then we're going to go into elevators, infrastructure, other issues that we as residents and resident leaders have basically been stonewalled by the agency to resolve within the last decade or so. The Federal 8 was formed back in 2011, basically, and it consisted of the resident leaders of the WISE consolidation. And so those representatives are here now currently, which consist of WISE Towers, which is Ernesto, the president of WISE Towers, Ernesto, which some of you know through our meetings, Carrero. And then we have also Mary Meyerback from Sandra Thomas, which is the senior building. And then we have De Hostos, which is the president, Ramona Minor, on the call right now. We have Mona Lisa, who represents the Dome site on 84th Street. Her buildings are managed by a private entity. Then we also have Cynthia Tibbs, who is the president of Brownstones, the Brownstone. And then we also have Wise Rehab, which is represented by the president, Venus Perez. And we also have Starlin Fakaris, who represents Wasura Site C. So basically, the Wasura stands for West Side Urban Renewal. There's 3 sites, Site A, Site B, Site C. A is my building, 120 West 94. And those Wasura buildings were originally built with federal funds. And also the Brownstones and Wise Rehab. The buildings that are now going through RAD, which is Wise Towers, I'm sorry, PAC, P-A-C-T. Those were originally classified as city-state buildings managed by NYCHA. The federal buildings, which are the Wasura buildings, are also managed by NYCHA. They are right now not currently going through PAC or RAD transition under the blueprint. So in the report that was developed by Jack Chandris, we basically, again, highlighted issues that we are all concerned about, and we're looking for the community board to help us in seeing what we can do to have a voice, to have the higher executive board of NYCHA come to the meetings and sit down at the table with us to see what we can do to, again, resolve these issues. So that is the summary. I'm going to go into the main report that was developed by Jack Chandris, and with input from myself, from Cynthia Tibbs, Mona Lisa. Margarita Corrett also is part of the Federal 8. I don't know if she'll be on the call tonight, but she represents Amsterdam Houses. So we have been meeting, as was said earlier, for the last 2 years now, since the end of 2019, with Larry Woods from Goddard Riverside, again, to organize and to have some kind of framework, again, to address these issues. I just want to say thank you anyway for allowing us this time to really cement a new relationship with the community board and to move forward and working together as partners in the community to see what we can do to resolve these issues. So I'm going to go into the first section, which is the safety and physical security, okay? Again, by neglect of the physical security at the Wasura buildings and other complexes here on the Upper West Side, NYCHA has created a safety and security issue for us as residents and for our neighbors at large. These security issues are very widespread, pervasive, and they are considered as de facto norms, right? They are prohibited by various laws and regulations of the City of New York State, and HUD. NYCHA bills itself as the world's largest landlord, and it's really the world's largest slumlord. Physical security issues break down into a variety of specific areas, which will be delineated and explained. To begin, NYCHA's layered access system must be explained, as it has broad implications for how CB7 can leverage existing infrastructure to improve safety and security without any money being spent. So now I'm going to go into what the layered access system looks like and what it involves, okay? It's a system of off-the-shelf hardware and software, commercially available from a company called Genetec, which uses a software to activate the systems citywide. They are one of the leading providers of software to manage high security installations, including doors, key fobs, and video surveillance systems using internet cameras. So a key fob system was manufactured by Curry, K-E-R-I, purchased by NYCHA at 6 times the street price on Amazon. So basically, a lot of the equipment that is bought is basically overpriced. Funding was provided by the city council, by Helen Rosenthal and Gail Brewer, to make sure that we had this system installed. Unfortunately, the system at this time is faulty, and it doesn't work the way it was designed to work when it was first offered to us back in 2014. Now, it has come to no surprise that 3 companies formulate the layered access system for NYCHA and wrote its specifications. Only 3 contractors install the layered access system for all of NYCHA, and the profiteering is considerable. The system is so expensive. In fact, the city council has a moratorium on funding new installations and money promised to the restorer buildings for doors and additional cameras because of this. And, you know, it makes sense because we need to use our tax dollars in a appropriate manner, not in a wasteful way. And that's one of the issues with NYCHA as a agency, is that our city council provides the funding that we're needed to restore services in our buildings. But unfortunately, when NYCHA as an agency gets control of that money, everything again gets marked up triple to the value of the original estimate of what the cost would be to do the repairs. So that's a major problem. What is relevant to our layered access system here on the Upper West Side is that we can easily, right, see that duplicated traditional mechanical keys with unique and non-duplicate key fobs should be put in to basically secure the system. We can add logging, monitoring, and auditing access of every single use of a key fob, which can be matched to camera footage. But again, this is not happening. This is what we want to see happen. We can also add sensor hardware to the doors, creating smart doors whose open-close status may be continuously detected, enabling detection of propped open doors. Supports for video cameras which are stored for 21 days, not 1 week, not 3 days, with footage viewable at any time from the computer. So what's happening right now is if the door is disengaged for whatever reason and it's propped open, there's no one really monitoring the system. So that's a problem, and that should be addressed. Because what's the purpose of putting in a layered access system if no one's monitoring it, if no signal is being responded to when the door is propped open for more than 3 minutes or 5 minutes or even an hour, okay? Doors are easily vandalized. Originally, when these doors were researched, they were supposed to be vandal-proofed, according to the Executive Vice President of Safety within NYCHA. So obviously, that information was not reliable. They're constantly breaking down. So the layered access system was originally configured to detect whenever smart door is held or propped for a period in excess of a specified time, and then notify a specific list of recipients via email or SMS text message, and also log the system that NYCHA has. However, NYCHA, has deliberately disabled such notifications, even though it would be possible to identify criminal activity as it occurs. And then notify both NYCHA's Internal Security Division and the NYPD for immediate resolution. So I just want to pause there for a minute. The cameras originally that were put in were supposed to be monitored by management every day to see if there were any incidences that need to be addressed. What's happening now is basically when an incident does happen, the NYPD has to go to the management office to get footage for those cameras, to find out and investigate whatever reports come into their office. So again, if there's no one monitoring the cameras or the cameras are not active, it again fulfills no purpose. They're basically useless, to be honest with you. It's just like they're there for a physical purpose to make people feel that there is some kind of sense of safety and security, but they're not operational. All right, so in the next section, we're going to talk about, again, how we can address these camera situations when it comes to safety and security in all of the buildings. All of the buildings, again, suffer varying degrees of inadequate safety and security. The systems are so expensive. One lobby door, let's just say at Wasura B, costs $185,000, which is an astronomical fee for just one door. Again, the door does not work. It needs to be upgraded. It relies upon traditional mechanical locks, which are routinely damaged, disabled, or otherwise defeated. And they're permitted to remain in that condition for long periods of times. The brownstones, which are also Wasura, do not have layered access. They rely upon conventional mechanical door locks and have no cameras installed. The cost to equip each building with layered access system, and this is back in 2011, was $208,000. And now the cost, of course, has gone up astronomically. As originally constituted, the layered access system requires a separate server per building at a cost of approximately $150,000 per building for hardware and software. The Upper West Side buildings refused to permit this waste and stonewalled on approving installation until NYCHA agreed to share a single server using Wi-Fi, which was in fact done. The amount allocated would otherwise have been inadequate to install more than a server and 2 cameras per building. So again, as the federal aid, we had to fight to make sure that the money was used in a constructive way that we could all benefit from safety and security. Had we gone along with the way that the specs were written for the original project, we would have needed more money from the city council if we did not use Wi-Fi as a way to run the signal to all the buildings that were identified to receive layered access. Okay, so now I'm going into the subset. NYCHA is exempt from all code enforcement. I'm just going to give some highlights, okay? And I will send this report to everyone because it's pretty lengthy. And also, we're going to speak to the fact about there's vagrancy, drug use, unauthorized individuals, drug sales, gang activity, illegal occupants, okay? And because of the system breaking down through vandalism, again, it just leaves an open door for anyone and everyone to come to the buildings and do whatever they want. And also it affects the safety of our seniors, those of us who have lived in the buildings for a long period of time are afraid, basically, because there has not been any redress to ensure our safety. Even though by law, there is a policy on the books of NYCHA that doors that are unsecure should be repaired within 24 hours, but it's not being enforced. I'm going to pause at this time before I go further.
This is very interesting and helpful, and I'm impressed with the level of detail. What are the, after security, what are the other like high level areas? And maybe we should just like select a few of them to go more into, and the others we'll review the report.
Yeah, well, that's what I figured. We'll do that. So the other areas that we want to talk about, let me just go through the report. As I already mentioned, the vagrancy in the building, threats and violence from, residents or visitors who are dangerous or mentally disturbed, drug dealing, gang activity, loitering, missing air conditioning brackets, issues with the police not responding, garbage dumping, recycling, smoking, air hazards.
Also the scaffolding staying up around the buildings for.
Yeah, I was getting to that. So sidewalk sheds, scaffolding becoming permanent. Also, I know at Amsterdam houses, basically the whole complex is covered up with metal netting, okay? So residents can't even look out the window or breathe, basically. And that's been up there for way over a year. And it's dangerous because it's dark. The whole place is like a maze where there's scaffolding throughout the whole complex. So if you're walking through there, you can get lost and you cannot find your way out. So that's something that is definitely a serious issue. I know at the Dome site, there's flooding going on constantly, rodents, infestations. We have vandalism constantly, ventilation fans in apartments that are ineffective or broken. We have also garages that are ineffective when it comes to security, cars being vandalized, stolen, broken into, and these are services that residents pay for. The parking permits cost over $100 a year or more, and they're not really safe or secure. I spoke about vermin, definitely infrastructure when it comes to capital projects. All right. We have no idea if there are any capital projects other than what we see, the netting at Amsterdam houses. Are there any capital projects going on in the area? Because we have no access to that information, nor are we notified. Let's see. Elevators definitely always malfunctioning. They're old. They need to be replaced. That's an issue every week where all the buildings are suffering from outages. Unreliable water, including hot water, cold water, definitely unreliable heat. We know at the brownstones, there has not been any gas so that people can cook. We're talking about plumbing leaks, bathroom wastewater, radiator leaks, valves, floods in the apartments. So electrical failures and upgrades, roof leaks, tank.
Can't hear you, Polly.
Yeah. So Polly, am I the only one that Polly's?
I can't hear her either.
Polly, you cut off.
Time there was a newsletter that went out years ago that has stopped completely.
Oh, Polly, we lost you for the last minute or so.
Okay.
Last we heard was no gas somewhere around there.
Okay. All right. So basically after that, what I spoke about is no staff lists or contact information being available to us, because we have changes constantly. We have new management that comes in and we're not notified of the person's name or given, phone number to call. So that should be addressed. We're not invited to sit down at the table to discuss what projects, what policies, what operations, what's going on at our different sites. And that's under the 964 regs, where we are supposed to be partners with management to make decisions regarding, anything that's happening on our grounds. So that's basically a snapshot of the report, which I'm going to send so that this way you guys can look at it, because there is a lot, but we really want to focus on the main issues right now, which are elevator breakdowns, safety and security. All right. And again, having management sit down to discuss these issues with us.
Okay, so thank you, Polly. And number one, if you share, I think I got I can share, you can share, however we want to do that. But thank you very much for that very poignant and just, I'm sure we were all very, disappointed, disturbed, various different adjectives to use. So very saddened by that. But let's try and see what we can do. So two things, we can open this up to any questions or any thoughts or anybody else who would want to share. So if people want to raise their hand, or any members that also want to add their thoughts. And then the second part would be to sort of focus on kind of what we can do to help. And I think one of the things that you sort of said at the end, but I'll highlight, because I know we've had some conversations, is that there's a general frustration that you haven't been able to sort of get NYCHA to the table. And I think one of the things that have been expressed in previous meetings is what can we do to help get them to the table? So all of those above. So I'm going to start share. I see a couple of hands raised. And so Polly, you were sharing. Don't worry about sharing now. We'll figure out how to share afterwards.
Okay.
So Madeline, our resident NYCHA senior person on our committee has her hands raised, and we'd like to hear from her.
Anybody can answer, but I think Polly would be the best person can answer. For decades, we've been dealing with this. I've been involved with NYCHA. I think she's frozen.
Oh.
Okay, she could probably still hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I've been involved with this in 2009, and we all are dealing with the same type of things in our development. My question is, why are we dealing with NYCHA, which they are our landlords? That's all true. But why are we dealing with our landlords when they don't listen to us? I think more elected officials, and forgive me for saying this because I see you there, Helen, and I thank you. You're the only elected official I think it's here. But my thing is that we don't carry much weight with NYCHA. We need a push and pull type of situation where we don't have to advocate by ourselves. Most residents don't want to get involved, and I understand why, because it's frustrating, and I think that's intentional by NYCHA, frustrate the residents so much they give up. But I think when we put elected officials in office, we should congregate together and and take care of this broadly, where we would have some support. You would have our support, and then we would have your support. But I don't see very much of that. And Helen, you know, I've been coming to city council meetings, testifying for years, and it's the same old conversation. I think we stop dealing with NYCHA and go more boldly and forcing them to do what they need to do, because they don't respect us. They don't care about us. And I'm going to say this, they don't give a crap what happened to us. And this has been for decades. So I need us to work together. Not saying that we don't work together with the TAs and community board. What I'm saying is we need more of a force to get them moving. We had a meeting with Jerry Nadler, and Senator Schumer alluded to this, that NYCHA is getting between $36 and $40 billion. I want to know who's going to handle that money. And NYCHA sure doesn't need to be handling that money. This is where the elected officials step in. They need to be more transparent, because all these problems have been going on for decades, and we've been letting them handle it. It's enough letting them handle it. Let the residents, elected officials, we get to a more broader solution to this problem. It's enough. This has been going on. I've been involved since 2009. We're in 2021, and the issues that Polly was mentioning, those issues been going on since I've been involved. So it's nothing new to us, but we don't know what to do. Not to say not what to do. We don't know how to be forceful enough to get NYCHA to do this. So I think we say, forget about NYCHA. Let's do something broadly where it's gonna put NYCHA in the light and make them do something, or even the mayor, which he's outgoing anyway. But I think this is a time that we have to think outside the box and deal with that in a different way, because it's not, they can hear us all day long. We need mold, we have this. They haven't done anything yet. So I think we need to go more broadly and bigger to get something solved. Thank you, Polly, for that presentation.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so I want to agree with you. And that's why, Madeline, we are here now, right? To work with Community Board 7. And we've been working with Guarded Riverside as a voice to help us move forward, because we do realize that NYCHA doesn't respect us, nor are they following the 964 regs, where we're supposed to be treated as partners. Mm-hmm. All of these issues are old issues. So right. That's why we're here now, so that we can start a partnership, mm-hmm. And join together so that we can get this done, right?
And thank you, Helen, for being here.
Yeah, definitely, of course. And so what I want to speak to, Helen has sat down at many meetings with us as well over the years, and she knows about the camera situation, how we fought to have the NYPD have access to those cameras, right? And, it's just that the agency itself is so dysfunctional, and it's like this closed system where they want to do business as usual. And I'm glad that, Steve, you brought it up to Nadler about the $40 billion, that if it's being allocated, it needs to be monitored. Definitely. They should not be given another slew of money just to waste.
But not by the monitor they have now that Trump appointed. We need somebody different.
Yeah. So that's why we're going to come up with a plan. This is the start, right, of a plan to have them be held accountable and to move forward. And we're not going to accept,
Exactly.
I can't do anything. I know Victor once told me that NYCHA stands for no, you can't have anything, right? All right. And so those days are over. So that's why we are here. Yes,
Put
Larry.
the foot down.
So when we discussed this, and I want to thank Stephen for meeting with the federal aid and doing a lot of groundwork to prepare for this. He invited the various leaders to do a brief report from each development. And we realized it might just go nowhere. You'll hear the litany of complaints, but what's the next actionable steps? And that's part of what's in the report. And Madeline, you're right on the money. We realized the group used to meet with higher ups in NYCHA. That went by the wayside years ago. They're not listening anymore. So we felt between the federal aid NYCHA leaders and the community board and the elected official, including Gail's office, who we've been in touch with, and the assembly members and the senators and our council members, as a united force, we had to bring NYCHA to the table and go through these litany of issues. There's just the trust and the communication has totally broken down. Nobody wants to hear about blueprints when a couple of $1,000s for a front door has been lost in a black hole. If 589 Amsterdam had this money, it's been allocated, they've been waiting for it. They can't get answers over a simple allocation of money and getting their door fixed. They don't want to hear about blueprints and pie in the sky plans when basic steps can't be taken.
Exactly.
So we want to focus on getting some of the basic things taken care of now, rebuild communications, then people can have a communication about RAD and monitoring it. And I'm in touch with Ernesto all the time. Things are going not so well, some things are going well, but the communications suck. And there needs to be monitoring of the process, especially any new buildings are going to go into RAD. It needs to be monitored every step of the way. And tenants' voices need to be heard, they need to be consulted. And there is a lot of interest in management, co-equals with management, because their managers are ready. So,
thanks, Larry. So I want to do two things. Number one, I just want to acknowledge also that Erica Overton is on. She's Linda Rosenthal's chief of staff. So we do have another representative in the area, and I just want to acknowledge that.
Thanks, Stephen. You gave me a promotion, though I'm the deputy chief of staff.
Well, I feel you earned it, but that's something else.
Deputy.
I'm going to make a call tonight about this. We've got a lot of other hands raised. I know, Jack, I think you're able to talk now, and I met you a few times, and I know that you're going to want to share some. So can you speak now?
Well, let's see if it works.
We hear you now. So I know
technology, amazing.
There you go. So Jack, just to let everyone know, Jack is one of the presidents. He didn't get a chance to introduce himself. Perhaps, Jack, you can introduce yourself for a bit, and then you have a few minutes to speak as well.
Okay, I am the resident council president for Wasura B, which is at 74 West 92nd. And again, Wasura B is one of the West Side Urban Renewal Area buildings. We are federally owned buildings, and NYCHA is paid to manage our buildings. And for decades, as Polly noted, our money has just flowed into this sewer where it vanishes. We don't get essential upgrades. We don't get upgrades to our plumbing, to our electric, to our roofs, to our doors, windows, nothing. All the money vanishes. And the $40 billion that NYCHA has been allocated is again going to vanish. I just wanted to clarify one point, and that is on the NYCHA monitors team. I have had nothing but outstanding service from the monitors team, and the monitor was appointed by a federal judge, Judge William Pauley. who was actually appointed to the bench by President Clinton. So it's not the case that this has been managed by Trump. It actually isn't. And the monitors team has been very effective in getting some of the improvements made. You know, I would still have a door that doesn't lock and a garage door that was missing, was it not for the monitor. And you'll read about the sorts of problems we face in the report in detail. What we're hoping is that the community board can use its power and its reputation to force NYCHA, senior people at NYCHA, vice presidents, to come to the table with elected officials and representatives from HUD. We can all sit down as we once did and actually have productive discussions. Right now, there's no one compelling NYCHA to do anything. And so what we need to do is have CB7 say, look, these buildings are in our area. We do have some jurisdiction. We do have safety and security issues. Why won't you come to the table? And I think that that bully pulpit will drag NYCHA kicking and screaming to sit down with all of the resident leaders so we can air our grievances and start making progress. Because right now, all that happens is we go to an elected official, the elected official goes to governmental, which would be Brian Honan at NYCHA, who just dissembles, prevaricates, and outright lies. He stalls, that's his job. Oh, I'll get back to you on that, and nothing happens. We can't continue on that path. We now have to move to a new path where things get done. And I think that working with CB7, elected officials, and the new administration for both HUD in the federal building downtown and in Washington, we can start making those changes.
Thank you. Can I quickly just jump in as one of the co-chairs? That was really well put, Jack. And I think that is a lot of what we had discussed with Jerry Nadler's team. And I think what a lot of us are working, it seems like we're all getting to the same conclusion, which is that we should try to get the electeds and NYCHA to the table for this discussion, and HUD if possible. And we should just think about what's the best way to do that. Is it a joint letter with our elected officials where we request that happen, and then start some kind of working group structure? But I just want us to think about like what the mechanics would be for our next steps in order to do that, since I think we're all leaning in that direction.
Great. Well, we have a couple more community board members that have their hand raised, and I'm just going to go in order, and I see everyone. So it's going to be Robert, Richard, and Roberta. So that's a lot of R's, but I see all of you, and you're going to get your opportunity. So Robert, if you want to make your point, please do so, or ask your question.
Thank you, Stephen. I came on the board in 2012, and Victor was the head of the housing committee. And the noise, the voice was boisterous then on NYCHA, and the political dimension of NYCHA, and the appropriations committee at that time. Charlie Rangel was the chairman of the appropriations committee, and one of the darling projects for Charlie, because of his constituency, was Douglas. And so we had even communicated with his office along with Madeline, I don't know if you recall that, but to try to get some kind of response, what the stopgap was, because we did know that with respect to the rehabilitation funds, it was money that was allocated federally, not locally, federally. And yet it could never ever find its way to the city. So that I think that a piece that's missing here that I haven't heard in discussion unless I've missed it, and one that would reanimate the NYCHA task force that Madeline and Roberta set up and others. And that I would like to see a task force of political representatives only. We have Richie Torres in Congress now. Now, he's not only a product of one of the massive housing projects in the Bronx, but in city council, he was a very strong voice now. And when you see his press conferences out of his congressional seat, they're about NYCHA. He's talking about NYCHA still. So we have Helen, who's always been in there. We have another warrior there with Gail. And so
Alinka Samuel, she's city council. She's the chair of the public housing.
In the city council right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so you have this lineup of elected officials that are focused on NYCHA issues. So then I would love to see the task force, and one of the positive products of the task force was that broad-based meeting that you had, and I don't know how far citywide it was, but it was significant enough, okay? And that would host a task force that would convert into a working monitor group, for example, because as you already stated, that whatever billion, was it 32 billion that's coming in?
40, between 36 and 40.
36 and 40. So, you know, we know what happens. So we should have a watchdog group. And that is and I would really suggest, this is me thinking, okay, that someone of the energy and the clarity and the cogency of Richie Torres. Now, I don't know Richie Torres. I think he's a wonderful young man, but I don't know him. But I know that
him. He went to one of our housing committee meetings.
Before he became a rock star then, right?
Yeah.
So that the point is that I think that's missing, because we've always had Helen on our side and there were other people and so on and so forth. But as a group, as a gang of 10 who are legislators, who are writing the law in Washington and in city and in the state, I think it would make a big difference. And because these are headliners, no one has to listen to anything. I mean, we may write the best resolutions in town, but no one has to listen. There's no compelling, there's no teeth in it. Our resolutions have to have teeth. And if we can manage to pull together a congressional task force on NYCHA, and I'm not sure whether every district of the boroughs has a NYCHA project, but we're spread around enough. And you know, that's the elephant in the room. It has always been, and it's always in contention. And anyone who thinks that, you know, we're back in the catbird seat, that no one is going to touch us, just look around you, okay? You know, the infill is an insidious process, and everybody picks up a little piece here, a little piece there. Before you know it, nada. So that we need the next step up in advocacy, and these are the electeds in Congress who have whose origination is in the city of New York, in NYCHA, and the young lady you just mentioned that head of the committee in the city council with Torres, and I'll say him again, I'll say it 100 times, and with young people like that's the generational thing. My generation was when Victor's generation, I don't know if he's NYCHA in those days as I was, it was the place to live. So we have a different perspective. You know, it's a little distant.
I think, Robert, we want to let other people speak. So I think you've done a good job making your point, and I think we should let other people share their thoughts as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Appreciate your thoughts. Richard, you are next, sir.
Yeah, I was going to start out and say that this might be a dumb question, but I think I've upgraded, and this is a dumb question. But I'm hearing a lot of people saying that basically NYCHA is completely broken, and that we have to work around NYCHA, and that we can't trust them, and that we can't trust them with money. We need some other entity. Now, NYCHA isn't irreplaceable. We have an election coming up. NYCHA reports to the mayor. Why can't we fix NYCHA? And I see Helen shaking your head, and I'm not up to speed enough, but why is it that this agency is just so broken that it's broken beyond repair, and that with the right pressure and with a new mayor, that we can't make it a campaign issue right now and get a mayor who's going to come in and fix a completely broken agency that's leaving far too many of our neighbors living in appalling conditions? And why are we just accepting that this agency will continue to exist as a broken agency, and that we have to work around it to spend this $40 billion and to fix the issues?
Are you looking for Helen to answer? I mean, I can give my 2 cents, which is if you make it a mayoral.
I'd like her to answer and hear what you have to say.
Okay, well, let's let Melissa give some thoughts, and Helen, you're now on the spot, but she's nodding her head, and okay. So
Yeah.
Melissa, do you want to share your thoughts?
I mean, my thought is like, yes, you can make a campaign issue, which will lead to all the candidates saying that they'll change NYCHA and then getting into office and not really doing anything to structurally address the issues. Like that's me being cynical. But I just want to quickly address Robert's point about pulling in other congressional reps. I think we're better off keeping it to first our local reps and kind of starting from there before pulling in others. But no,
We
sorry.
haven't done anything yet. We have to go bigger.
Helen, do you want to add some thoughts? Again, just sort of joking, you're on the spot, but maybe it
No,
might be time for you to add.
thank you. I mean, I of course want to start by thanking all the NYCHA leaders who are here. And Larry, I know you have regular meetings with the Federal 8. You've just done a great job keeping everyone together on the same page. I really want to thank you for that. And what everyone is describing here has been, the disappointment of I mean, everyone is there. There's no elected official who's happy about NYCHA. And when you think about the last campaign, mayoral campaign, I think the tenant leaders had the mayoral candidates come and sleep in someone's home.
That got us.
Right? Right? And
Yeah,
look
yeah.
where that got us. And why is that the case? It's because the NYCHA does not report to the mayor. NYCHA is a federally run agency, federally funded. The mayor gives money on the edges. And now we have a federal monitor. I mean, you get a sense of the weightiness of this problem. There's actually a federal monitor who's been set up to try to fix it. But, what Jacques is describing, what Polly is describing, what Mary and Cynthia and Mona Lisa and Ernesto and Ramona are living through, and Madeline every single day is inhumane. There's I mean, we all agree it's inhumane. I mean, I think, we go through phases when there's something particularly egregious where we'll call in the press and then actually get some action out of NYCHA. But it shouldn't be that way. And, the misspending shouldn't happen. And everyone should be treated with respect. But I think even the workers, the NYCHA employees would say they're not treated with respect. So there's a lot of blame to go around. There's a lot of mismanagement that's going on. I will say that you all have mentioned a couple of ideas tonight, and I've been texting with Councilmember Ampry Samuel about some of your ideas. I love the idea that we get it out get it out publicly now, that we want a transparent accounting of how this stimulus money is spent. And Alika will be a leader in trying to get that to happen. She's been terrific as the chair of the committee. And there are ongoing and persistent problems. Lastly, we've mentioned a couple of capital projects. I share everyone's frustration. And about 6 months ago, in thoughts about my departure, I reached out to NYCHA and said, come on, where are we on all my NYCHA projects that I've funded? And, we've had Vivian, I think she might still be on the line, but Cindy Cardinal, who's my new chief of staff, will tell you, we've had a number of very unpleasant meetings. And at the last one, which was probably the best one, Cynthia, you were on, Starlin was on, and Ramona was on, because I asked them, and Margarita at Amsterdam Houses, because there are 4 projects that really could move along quickly that NYCHA has never met with the residents about. And they were asking me what should be done. And I said, this is ridiculous. And you know, we just called everyone, put them on the line and spoke about each of their projects for about 15, 20 minutes and actually got back right on track. I mean, the project that NYCHA thought we wanted for the brownstones was completely fakaka and not what Cynthia has been advocating for. And same with, same on all the projects. So we are trying to get on the right foot for the spending of the capital money that a council member can allocate. And I have thoughts about all the projects that were raised. I love the idea of the community board engaging in this and trying to help out. I know some of the that a lot of times the electeds will do this sort of by development as big projects come up. So like Fulton Houses right now has a pretty active sort of elected community board, tenant leader, task force. Gail's working on that as well. And we could certainly model off that. Each of the buildings that we're talking about has multiple infrastructure needs. It's endless, and the fight with NYCHA is endless. And, you know, I guess I'll just end by saying what I said at the beginning. All these tenant leaders are remarkable, how they've stuck in there. I mean, year after year calling friggin', you all know it, you know, Brian Honan putting in the ticket system. Oh, now it's not a ticket system. You call this number. Oh, now it's not NYCHA. You're dealing with RAD and the new property owner. Well, the new property owner has just as many layers as was in NYCHA. So we're never going to get anywhere with them either.
Now it's time to think outside the box.
Yeah, so I'm here listening and appreciating all of you. Thank you, Madeline.
All right, thank you.
So just from a next, I just want to keep a sort of agenda. I know Roberta's been patiently waiting. I see Jack has his hand back if he wants to speak. And then I think we should then sum up kind of what we can do, what are our thoughts. I think I have some ideas. I certainly want to hear the co-chairs and their ideas. But I think that would be a good, you know, a good sort of next step. So Roberta's been very patient, and I want to give her an opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Helen, and thanks, Polly, and thanks, Madeline. It has been so frustrating. We have a 6,000 or maybe 6,500 units of affordable housing in our community that is part of NYCHA. It's huge. And it's so frustrating that we can't take care of people. That you know, when I was chair, we had the task force. We met with people, we met with the other community boards. We had discussions. We met with, you know, there are 12 community boards on Manhattan. We met with all of them. We worked on this. It wasn't like we weren't trying. And it's just so frustrating. And this is something that we must do. We must succeed at this. We now have a new government in Washington who are helping us. Chuck Schumer had a program yesterday with Linda Rosenthal, where we talked about it. We've got to keep telling our leaders, we've got to keep telling our elected officials, this is what we want, this is how we want it to do. And as a community board, we have to keep fighting.
Thank you, Roberta. Jack, did you put your hand back up? Did you want to speak? And maybe we'll give you the opportunity to close.
Okay, I just wanted to remind everyone of, I think it was Bismarck's word, that politics is the art of the possible and the attainable. So when dealing with NYCHA, we really have to focus on what can we do? How can we solve the problem? And saying, oh, NYCHA needs to be dismantled and reconstructed, that's an argument that isn't going to fly with anyone, particularly because anytime an elected tries to tinker with NYCHA, the response is, oh, you want to end public housing, we want to vote somebody else in to replace you. But if we can instead just focus on how can we fix things on the Upper West Side, maybe that serves as a model for other areas. And the whole point is to force NYCHA to actually come back to the table, as we once did. You know, when Polly started the Federal 8, we had senior people from NYCHA come to meetings. That stopped because NYCHA realized there was no pressure. It didn't have to do this. We need to go keep that pressure up to bring them back to the table instead of trying to go for the overarching, how do we reform a $4 billion a year agency with 13,000 employees? That's a task that is monumental, but we can focus on fixing buildings on the Upper West Side. And I think that's the goal, and we shouldn't lose sight of that goal. Pick an attainable goal and go for it, and that's the goal. So if CB7 can put pressure on NYCHA to deliver senior vice presidents from capital and from operations so we can discuss what projects are in place for our buildings, what is the procedures that are going to be used, what are the bids like, can we get input into the bidding process, can we review the process afterwards? You know, for example, I don't know if you know this, NYCHA has 1,800 elevators, 1,800 elevators. Why isn't it buying direct from the biggest elevator manufacturers in the country and the world? Why isn't it buying quality products? Instead, it buys garbage. The lowest bidder supplies something which doesn't work, fails continuously during the warranty period, and then it's turned over to NYCHA and the failures continue. It costs more than a quality elevator would be put in, and we have the misery of never having working elevators. These are the sorts of things the community board can help us with on the Upper West Side. But going for reforming NYCHA is a great goal. Yeah, wonderful. Come back in 20, 30 years and let me know how it worked.
Jack, can I just respond to him?
Sure, madam.
This is what NYCHA does. NYCHA appeases you for a little bit. They give you enough to say, well, we want to hear you. We're going to look at this problem. And then once they figure we're bored or we're tired or we're fed up, they go back to same old, same old. So bringing NYCHA to the table, it shouldn't be an option because they're not going to listen to us anyway. We had forums with NYCHA, with CB7, as well as before I got on the board. And these are the same issues over and over. They appease you for a little bit, and then they go back. So that's what I'm saying. We have to find something different to I want to say, expose them for who they are. We can't keep coming to the table. Like, we have to go outside of NYCHA and then maybe come back, but we have to be able to put them in a position where they cannot refuse us.
All right, so I just want to comment and piggyback on what Jack and Madeline are saying. You know, as I said earlier, definitely NYCHA is agency that we've all dealt with over the years, etc. I feel that we should bring them to the table, that Community Board 7 should work with us to monitor what they're doing here on the Upper West Side. Okay, start with our area first. That's primarily what I'm interested in, to be honest with you. I have reached out to Nadler's office because if he's allocated $40 billion, I want to know how much of that money is being allocated to our area for capital repairs and infrastructure, because visually with my eyes, I don't see any capital improvement in this area for the last decade or so when it comes to public housing. So for me, that's number one, to be able to communicate, open up the lines of communicating, and also accountability. And we can do that by changing the law. You know, it's going to take steps because it is an authority. It comes under whole different guidelines. You know, you have your board selected by the city government, but then the money comes from the federal government Okay, and then you have state guidelines. So we need to look at that and address that, the whole structure of the authority itself. But right now, I'm only focused on our area and what we can do for our public housing campuses
We
here.
can get all that money allocated to us.
Yeah, not all of it, but I want to know what percentage basically of that money will be allocated to our area. And I'm asking for information, all right, from the agency to find out for the last 3 years, okay, how many projects have been allocated to this area, how much, what's the percentage compared to other areas? Because we can't continue waiting while money's being funneled elsewhere, okay? So that's what I want to see happen.
That's
Okay.
the purpose that we're here.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So I think this has been a great discussion, and it's a start. It's not ending the discussion. We're starting a broader discussion. So, but I think in terms of this meeting and this sort of session, I hope we all feel it was a good beginning. What are the next steps? I know Melissa, I know Louisa, we spoke a little bit, we certainly could write a letter. We certainly could start a resolution to start this process. I wanted to get your thoughts and what you thought about it, but it seems there's a handful of things, whether it be about our elected officials and sort of accountability on this money, where it be about sort of asking, NYCHA to come to the table, even if we think it could be frustrating as a start, but I wanted to get your thoughts on what you think would be a good first step in terms of this process.
Yeah, I mean, my inclination is that I don't know how helpful a resolution is. I am inclined towards doing a letter and asking that our elected officials also sign on to the letter so it packs more of a punch. And the letter would be asking NYCHA to come to the table for at least an initial meeting, or we could ask for like a working group. I'm not sure like which ask. It might be easier to start with like a first meeting ask, but to me, that is the most like actionable next step. I don't know if other people feel differently. And then I think, the second piece of about like capital projects and accountability, I think that can be sort of worked in as an ask once we convene as a group.
Can I respond to that? Helen was at we had the task force, we had a NYCHA forum, and the NYCHA people were there and they did nothing. This is what I'm saying. Helen, you can tell, Helen and I, we were back and forth trying to get these people to commit to something. The only thing they did was there was a couple of times, we did it at Amsterdam houses. A couple of people, I talked to them, they got their apartment fixed only because we had that forum. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done anything. But they fix a couple of things and then leave the rest of the people to fend for themselves. So
yeah. I want to say something real quick. Sure. I get what you're saying. And we've decided on letting go about what they have not done and what they're not going to be doing, and what we're bringing to the table with the CB7, moving forward and creating solutions, and then saying we're expecting this and this and this at a certain time so that we can focus on here on the Upper West Side, and we're leaving that behind. We're leaving that behind because we're not, that's not going to exist anymore and on our agenda. So I just want to say that.
Thanks. Listen, I think there's a handful of ways. Let me just get this under control. There's a handful of ways that we can go about this. It's not a one-step approach, and necessarily, necessarily, Madeline, focusing on the elected officials doesn't mean that we can't ask someone to come to the table, right? I mean, I think there's a couple ways, and so let's not think it's an either or thing, and we could do those. A lot of people just raised their hands. We're at the end of our discussion. I'm going to make sure that Cynthia and other new people that were here to speak are going to speak. I see, and that's going to be it. So we're sort of at the end of our session, but I want Cynthia as an opportunity. She was a guest speaker, and then we're going to wrap this up and finalize it. So Cynthia, please speak.
Hey, what I wanted to say really fast is that I understand what Madeline's saying about the NYCHA forum, but we now have new administration that they are forced to work with us now, especially on the Upper West Side. Wise and Amsterdam and Douglas is now considered Manhattan 4. So we don't talk to the same old people we used to. Brian Honan is not our source anymore. We do need to write a letter where everyone needs to be on it, but it needs to go to the right people. We now have a list of who is in charge of this area. They have been forced to speak with us. There's a new vice president that just handles the Manhattan area. And he has come here. I have met him in person. We have had many conversations. He actually called me over the weekend. So moving forward, as Mona said, we have to have discussions with the right people. You need to know who they are. I will give you their names, their phone numbers, their emails, but the letters don't go to the same old people anymore. They have to go to the new people.
Thank you, Cynthia. So I think we're in agreement, Melissa and Luisa. I don't know if you want anything. A letter would be appropriate. We can coordinate with the people that have worked with us today in the federal aid, but why don't we, and I do think there's plenty in our DNS and plenty of public statements about our support for NYCHA to put a letter together in support of this. Is that where we want to end on this, co-chairs?
Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing the report, all of the reports from Polly and the others, and we can incorporate them into the letter.
Yeah.
I sent the reports to everyone in the email.
Thank you, Polly.
Yeah, I just want to, again, I think it would be more powerful if our elected reps would sign on to the same letter, and then I think it would get more of a response. But if that's not something that they're open to, okay, but I think we should at least make the ask from each office to also sign on.
I
One
agree with that.
elected is
I agree.
interested. I know one is.
Is that you?
I'm not sure which one,
Well,
but I know one of the electeds.
Who is it?
I saw Helen, we have others, we can coordinate it. So we're gonna finalize this. Doug, you didn't speak the whole time, so again, I call it the lightning round. You got a quick thoughts, and I'm gonna hand it back to the co-chairs because it's their meeting, but I think it's time to close up. I did want to thank everyone for sharing. I wanted to thank everyone who came in from the federal aid. I really am happy. I thought it was a really positive conversation that we had, and I'm really proud of the way everyone spoke today and worked together. And I think we're going to put together a great letter, and it's going to be the beginning. This is not the end of this conversation. It's the beginning of a bigger conversation about how we can all work together. Doug, you're going to get a few words, and I'm handing it back to co-chairs, and then we're moving. I'm going to move on because I think everyone else had opportunities to speak because we spoke.
Real quick. This is just a general, first of all, I'd asked in the chat if there's been any encouraging word from Marcia Fudge's office. But my point is that, just logically, my strong suggestion is we don't do things consecutively, but concurrently. There's no reason to, if you're going to write into NYCHA or you're going to go, you can attack things top down and bottom up at the same time. And I think a letter to the top and copy everyone and have it coming from as many people is great. So why not go to the HUD secretary and the vice presidents? Why not?
Can I interrupt a minute? Senator Schumer said that him and Nydia Velasquez is the one who formulated this, how we got the money. So I think we should include her on that because they was the two instrumental people in getting us this money.
Thanks, Madeline. So we'll coordinate everyone and make sure before the letter goes out, we get lots of people's opinions. And I'm going to hand it back to Melissa and Luisa to close up the meeting, or any other new business or whatever, however we want to finalize your housing meeting. And thank you for letting me facilitate this section. I appreciate it.
Thank you for doing so.
Yeah, I think we're at the end. Thank you so much again to our NYCHA leaders. Thank you, Councilmember Rosenthal. Thank you, Erica, for also sitting in. We'll distribute the report to the committee members when we receive it, as well as the supplementary reports that were mentioned. And I think we can take on doing a first draft of a letter and work on it with Steve and coordinate with Larry on getting electeds on board. Great.
We'll start.
All right.
Thank you all.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you.